Our boy, Isaac Vonerta, was literally out here speedrunning life on easy mode, locking in a Royal Academy recommendation at just 10 years old. The entire mansion was practically throwing a festival for him, with maids dropping legendary loot and his nanny baking him absolute top-tier snacks. Even Hans, the realest maid on the roster, pulled up with a massive haul of gifts just to thank Isaac for helping his sick kid. To top off the immaculate vibes, his little brother Jonas was in the cut, furiously strumming a lute like he was dropping the hardest acoustic cover of the century. Everyone was convinced this kid possessed infinite aura and was destined for absolute greatness. But then, bro wakes up violently screaming from an absolute nightmare, and suddenly the entire aesthetic is ruined. He is absolutely not a 10-year-old prodigy anymore. He's an older, washed-up dude sitting in a room that looks like it was straight-up copy-pasted from the medieval trenches. His aide, Lucas, walks in and immediately clocks that Isaac is fighting some serious internal demons from the way he's panting and tweaking on the bed. Internal thought, asterisk, why does the past still haunt me? I can still smell the gunpowder. I can still hear the screaming. Asterisk, Isaac casually admits he was just dreaming about 20 years ago, and Lucas, being an absolute Chad, tells him to completely drop the nostalgia and eat some fresh cheese he just whipped up. Lucas then reminds him that once he finishes his snack, they need to grind the sword training they skipped yesterday. To understand how my guy went from a generational talent to living in a literal bunker, we have to look back at the exact moment his life became a walking L. Right after those epic 10th birthday celebrations, Isaac caught a random flu that absolutely hard-stuck his progress for 3 agonizing months. When his HP just wasn't regenerating, his father, Count Gerda, panicked and summoned a gigabrain scholar from the Magic Tower to run a diagnostic. The scholar hit his dad with the worst patch notes of all time. Isaac wasn't sick, he was suffering from an ultra-rare, cursed constitution. Basically, every human has an innate mana vessel, but Isaac's mana circulation was insanely abnormal. It was flowing so violently fast that it was literally destined to shatter his internal hardware. And literally right after that diagnosis, the mana inside Isaac violently burst out like a shattered dam, colliding with the atmosphere. The resulting mana explosion was an absolute nuke that flatlined multiple people and left a ton of others severely injured. His mana would randomly chill out, only to spontaneously detonate without zero warning, completely destroying the mental health of everyone in the mansion. But the absolute breaking point was when a random explosion violently tore off his little brother Jonas's right arm. Internal thought, asterisk, I'm a monster. My own power ripped apart the brother who just wanted to play me a song. I don't deserve to see the sun. Asterisk, completely shattered by guilt, a 15-year-old. Isaac got on his knees and violently begged his father to lock him in solitary confinement so he could never hurt another living soul. And bro has been rotting in that exact cell ever since. Snapping back to the present timeline, Isaac watches Lucas randomly cough, but it wasn't a dry cough. My guy literally spit up raw blood. The second Isaac sees the red splat, it hits him like a freight train. Lucas is suffering from fatal mana poisoning just from standing in his passive AoE for way too long. Isaac immediately rushes over, borderline panicking, and aggressively orders Lucas to take at least a month off and touch some grass. But Lucas completely ratios him, refusing to leave, because he knows absolutely no one else will step up to take care of Isaac. Lucas even has the audacity to roast him, brutally reminding Isaac that he literally has 0 friends. Isaac fires back, threatening to kick him out for the disrespect, but Lucas just smirks and flexes that he hasn't taken any real damage yet. Lucas hits him with a soft smile, assuring Isaac he won't ever find a ride or die like him again. But Isaac drops the jokes, pointing out the dark reality that Lucas could literally drop dead at any second if he stays. Isaac finally dismisses him so he can meditate, and Lucas humbly bows out, saying it's been an absolute honor serving him. Later on, Isaac is forced to sit through another brutal flashback, and this time he sees Lucas's bloodied, lifeless body destroyed by one of his explosions. He jolts awake on his crusty bed, and the devastating truth officially sets in. Lucas too is already dead. After coughing up blood that day, he hadn't visited for over a year, and Isaac's dad eventually had to drop the tragic news of his passing. That very same day, Isaac's grief triggered another massive explosion, forcing him to completely and permanently seal his own door. He violently blames himself, convinced that if he had just been a cold, heartless jerk, everyone he loved would still be alive. So, Isaac officially adopts the villain persona, completely isolating himself from human connection. Years pass, and after actively refusing to eat, he wakes up entirely confused as to why his wildly resilient body refuses to flatline. The rations they drop for him have literally grown fuzzy mold, but when the hunger finally wins, he just casually dusts off the mold and takes a bite of the crusty bread. At this point, he looks like a straight-up boomer, his face weathered and aged, even though he's technically just a middle-aged dude. He dedicated every single waking second to grinding magic theory, desperately trying to patch his glitchy constitution. He read so much that he practically memorized the entire library. There was zero new knowledge left, leaving him completely reliant on raw intuition and vibes. Decades later, at the ripe age of 71, his insane hyperfixation finally pays off, and he finds a theoretical clue to fix his fading problem. But right at that moment of triumph, he hears his brother Jonas's voice echoing from the other side of the heavy door, completely jump-scaring him. Sticking to his edgy loner persona, Isaac speaks to him with absolute frost, demanding to know why he's bothering him. Jonas asks to come in, but Isaac ruthlessly denies him, forcing his brother to just speak from the hallway. The two brothers end up sitting on opposite sides of the massive door, leaning their backs against the cold wood. Isaac dryly asks how he's been, and Jonas sighs, saying it's a massively long story. Jonas then drops the bomb that today is the anniversary of their dad's death, leaving Isaac completely stun-locked. Isaac asks how their dad passed, and Jonas asks if he actually wants to sit through a massive lore dump. Isaac tells him to drop the story, and Jonas gladly winds the clock back 30 years to a brutal succession war between the first and second princes. Hours literally fly by before Jonas finally wraps up the geopolitical drama. Isaac actually smiles for the first time in decades, admitting his little bro is such a goated storyteller that he entirely lost track of time. Jonas jokes that he should have just become a bard, but admits it would have been a massive struggle since he can only play with one hand. Internal thought, asterisk. He's still making jokes about the arm I violently ripped away from him. God, my chest hurts. Asterisk, hearing that self-deprecating joke shatters Isaac's cold exterior, and he drops a genuine, agonizing apology for what happened. Jonas softly reassures him, saying that even though the family hated the destruction, they still loved Isaac to absolute death. But then, the vibe violently shifts when Jonas laments that it's a massive shame he couldn't see his brother's face one last time. Isaac gets confused, but then Jonas casually mentions that during the Royal War, a literal dimensional gate ripped open and interdimensional monsters flooded the server. Isaac leaps up in absolute shock, his heart pounding out of his chest, and screams through the door, asking if Jonas is okay. Jonas starts stammering, his voice breaking as he heavily regrets not coming to visit his brother way earlier. Bro. A thick pool of crimson blood starts rapidly seeping under the doorframe. Isaac violently yanks the door open, only to find a massive, bloody sword violently shoved straight through his brother's stomach. Jonas crashes to the cold stone floor, and Isaac just stands there in pure, paralyzing horror. He is absolutely speechless, unable to comprehend how his brother was literally bleeding out but still managed to tell a 3-hour story just to hear his voice. Isaac scoops his brother up onto his shoulder and slowly walks up the basement stairs. Hot tears stream down his wrinkled face, not just from the grief, but because Jonas's body is terrifyingly light, proving he had been starving for years. When Isaac finally breaches the surface after decades in the dark, he is greeted by a server wipe. The legendary mansion is reduced to absolute rubble, a massive monster corpse is just chilling in the hallway, and harsh winter snow is falling. Knowing the ground is too frozen to dig, he promises to hold Jonas's body until spring so he can give him a proper burial in the family cemetery. Looking at the apocalyptic wasteland, Isaac casually accepts that this is the exact moment he's going to die. Spring finally drops, the snow melts, and Isaac honors his promise, burying his brother in the thawing earth. Standing over the fresh grave, he raises his trembling hand and actually manages to spawn a perfectly stable fireball. A bittersweet smile breaks across his face. After 70 years of absolute torture, he finally beat the unbeatable Constitution. In his left hand, he holds the key to his success, a completely shattered runestone. Realizing he finally solved his life's mission, Isaac figures he has permission to just log off permanently. Internal thought, asterisk, if I had just figured this out 20 years ago, would any of them still be smiling? Will I ever be forgiven for the blood on my hands? Asterisk. With the weight of a ruined lifetime crushing him, Isaac collapses entirely to the dirt and peacefully dies. Suddenly, he hears a wildly familiar voice calling his name, and it absolutely sounds like Hans. Isaac refuses to believe his ears, assuming it's a hallucination because Hans has been dead for literal decades. But when his eyes snap open, He isn't a boomer anymore. He is entirely back inside his tiny, untraumatized childhood body. Hans is casually standing by the window, opening it to let in a breeze because Isaac is drenched in a cold sweat and looks insanely pale. Isaac sits up, completely mind-blown, wondering if this is just a hyper-realistic death dream flashing before his eyes. But then Hans looks out the window and groans about a young, two-armed Jonas stressing out the maids in the courtyard. A massive, genuine grin spreads across Isaac's face as the absolute magnitude of the situation hits him. He isn't dreaming. He just hit the biggest reset button in history. He has officially regressed to the past, and he is fully prepared to violently speedrun fixing his tragic timeline. But as he stares out the window, a brutal flashback hits him like a truck. He remembers overhearing the maids furiously complaining about cleaning up his explosive messes and constantly living in fear of his mana detonating. Hans had overheard them too and was storming over to scold them, but a young Isaac had physically stopped him, admitting the maids were completely validated. Isaac had even ordered Hans to stop visiting him, pointing directly at the bloody bandage wrapped around Hans's head, a direct result of standing too close to Isaac. Hans had dropped to his knees, radiating pure empathy, telling Isaac he was completely wrong and that he still cared deeply for him. Hans had brightly promised that this was just a rough patch and everything would be fine, which is insanely tragic because that exact loyalty is what got Hans killed by a mana explosion later on. Now, holding a second chance at life, Isaac knows exactly what he has to do, and it's going to break his own heart. Internal thought, asterisk, I can't let my affection for them become their death sentence again. I have to be the villain of this story. Asterisk Isaac drops his aura to absolute zero and coldly orders Hans to get out of his room. Hans thinks he's just throwing a tantrum until Isaac shoots him a death glare, making it brutally clear he wants him gone permanently. Hans reluctantly backs away, and even though it is physically destroying Isaac to do this, he knows pushing him away is the only way to keep him breathing. As Hans steps through the door, he softly begs Isaac not to shoulder the entire burden alone, and reminds him that it's okay to trust them. The second the door clicks shut, Isaac freezes. Hans never said those exact words in his previous dream. To fact-check reality, Isaac violently slaps himself across the face, and the stinging pain absolutely confirms he is 100% back in the past. He doesn't care how he died or why the universe respawned him. His only objective now is to ensure he never drops another mana nuke again. Back in his previous life, while rotting in the basement, he studied the ancestral records of Vonerta. Zeke was Isaac's great-great-grandfather, an absolute unit of a 10th-class mage who suffered from the exact same cursed constitution and actually conquered it. After years of agonizing research, Isaac had discovered his ancestors' cheat code, carving a highly specific pattern onto a mana stone to create a specialized rune. Isaac grabs a blank stone and starts carving, marveling at how absolutely goated it feels to have young, steady hands instead of his shaky boomer fingers. Basically, to prevent the mana explosion, the vessel holding his mana has to withstand the hyper-violent circulation, but Isaac's mana is so cracked that it violently shatters the vessel. However, for some insane plot armor reason, his vessel just repeatedly heals itself like nothing happened. That broken healing factor is the only reason he survived 20 previous explosions without instantly dying. The runestone he just carved acts as a deliberate hack. It intentionally damages his mana pathways so that the violent impact forces entirely new pathways to open up. By rerouting the mana through new circuits, the violent shock gets completely dispersed, stopping the explosion before it starts. The success rate is absolute garbage, and he barely pulled it off seconds before dying in his past life, so he's sweating bullets wondering if it'll work now. Isaac tries to summon a tiny, controlled fireball just to test the waters. To his absolute shock, he accidentally spawns a raging inferno, so massive it practically jump scares the soul out of him. He stares at his hands, completely bewildered by the sheer amount of raw power surging through his tiny body. He quickly checks the runestone, and it is completely intact, meaning the theory actually worked perfectly. Isaac realizes his internal hardware has officially upgraded to 3 separate pathways, allowing him to dual-wield 3 different magic spells simultaneously. He is practically a walking cheat code, but he immediately checks his ego because flexing his DPS isn't the goal. His only goal is 0 explosions, and he knows 3 circuits aren't enough to handle his full output. He figures out he has to aggressively spam magic to force even more pathways to open, minimizing the burden on his main vessel. But until he fully maxes out his circuits, absolutely no one is allowed near him, with 0 exceptions. Later on, Isaac is aggressively studying when a 1-2 year Old Hans bursts into the room with a massive grin, holding a plate of Isaac's favorite food. Isaac instantly gets annoyed, reminding Hans that he literally just exiled him from the room. But Hans just hits him with the puppy dog eyes, trying to riz him into eating by pointing out he's been skipping meals. Isaac is actually baffled by how aggressively Hans is ignoring his edgy loner boundaries. Realizing he can't win against a stubborn 1-2-year-old who doesn't understand trauma, Isaac sighs and asks Hans his age just to confirm he's acting like a normal kid. Defeated, Isaac takes a bite of the bread, and the heavenly taste instantly confirms his beloved nanny baked it. He missed this exact bread so much it actually hurts, and he casually asks Hans where the nanny is today. Hans drops the vibe entirely, revealing that the nanny went home because her son, Hinder, and literally all the other village kids caught a brutal case of pneumonia. Hearing that word, Isaac completely freezes, his chewing stopping mid-bite. He praises his parents for being chill enough to let her go home, but internally, his brain is running at max capacity. He carefully asks if Hinder was the only one who got sick, and when Hans confirms the entire village is down, the horrifying truth clicks. This isn't pneumonia, this is the infamous Black Goose Village incident. In his past life, this pneumonia completely wiped out the kids, leaving the nanny absolutely devastated until the day she died from his mana explosion. Internal thought. Asterisk. I can't let her lose everything again. I won't let my second chance be built on a graveyard of my people. Asterisk. Isaac immediately interrogates Hans, demanding to know what kind of monster the local hunters recently subjugated near the nanny's village. Hans is confused but mentions a giant, silver-furred spider that the Magic Tower nerds bought for research. Isaac's eyes widen as he realizes the absolute disaster unfolding. It was a winter spider. Winter spiders are weak combatants, but they breed like a plague and emit an insanely dense mana that acts as a suffocating poison to normal humans. The kids aren't coughing from a cold, they are literally drowning in mana poisoning. Isaac knows he's the only one in this era who actually understands this condition, so he instantly packs his inventory and vanishes into the woods. He knows he can't ping his parents for help. His dad is AFK at the border fortress, and his mom is roaming the continent searching for his cure. If he waits for the adults, Hinder is going to end up in a casket. Exhausted from sprinting through the woods, Isaac aggressively knocks on the nanny's door late at night. She opens it and is completely shell-shocked to find her young lord practically collapsing into her arms from stamina depletion. She panics, asking if the estate was attacked, but Isaac smoothly lies, saying he was just worried because she missed work. The nanny tries to block the door, terrified he might catch the pneumonia from Hinder. Isaac casually ties a cloth over his nose like a bandit and straight up barges past her into the crib. He dumps a massive bag of medicinal herbs on the table and barks out hyper-specific brewing instructions like a master alchemist. He walks into Hinder's room, and the moment he spots the bluish spots on the kid's face, he 100% confirms the mana poisoning diagnosis. Hinder weakly opens his eyes and practically begs Isaac not to fire his mom for missing her shifts. Isaac hits him with maximum empathy, gently patting his forehead and assuring him her job is safe because she's the only one who sneaks him the good wheat bread. After securing the kid's health, Isaac knows the herbs are just a temporary buff. To cure them permanently, he has to wipe the spider server. Later, Isaac casually pays a local hunter to guide him to an abandoned limestone mine. The hunter takes the bag and dips, warning Isaac that the cave is an absolute death trap where people constantly go missing. Isaac knows winter spiders exclusively nest in limestone, so he is fully prepared to enter the boss room. But before he aggroes the mob, he reviews his stats. With 3 active circuits, he is essentially operating at the level of a second-class mage. However, his mana vessel is basically made of glass, and since he has 0 intel on the mob count, he can't just run in blasting. Looking around the entrance, he spots the ultimate tactical item, Frost Belladonna. The berries are a human anesthetic, but they act as absolute kryptonite to winter spiders, which is insanely ironic since they share the same spawn point. Isaac grabs handfuls of the toxic plant, instantly regretting not bringing gloves as his hands violently swell up from the poison. Entering the pitch-black cave, he finds a sketchy ladder and slowly climbs down into the abyss. By the time he hits the floor, his 1-2-year-old stamina bar is absolutely flashing red, but the horrific scenery confirms he's in the right place. The floor is entirely littered with skeletons, both monsters and the missing humans the hunter warned him about. Hearing ominous rustling in the dark, Isaac immediately spawns a ring of fireballs around himself for defensive lighting. The fire illuminates hundreds of creepy, glowing eyes staring him down from the shadows. No way this man did that. Isaac calmly ties a wet cloth over his face, sets the toxic belladonna on fire, and completely hotboxes the entire cavern. The dense smoke hits the spiders, and they instantly start tweaking out and convulsing as the paralysis sets in. Seeing the horde violently debuffed, Isaac drops his defensive stance. It's officially time to begin the purge. While he waits for the poison to cook them, he remembers a brutal memory from his past life. He had watched from his window as a furious citizen confronted his dad, blaming him for failing to protect the Black Goose Village. It was that exact guilt trip that made Isaac want to move to the basement and coat the walls in deuterium just to bury his shame. But as he sits in the toxic cave, he aggressively pushes the emo memories away. He realizes the smoke strat isn't flawless because he's literally inhaling the poison too, forcing him to actively purify his own blood with internal mana. My guy is casually multitasking on god level, purifying his blood, maintaining a compressed firewall, and utilizing phase shift magic. He is actively sustaining a multi-circuit loadout, buying enough time for the spiders to completely paralyze. Once they drop, he mercilessly executes them with precision fireballs, noticing a few survivors scrambling deeper into the cave toward a water source. He knows they are completely cooked regardless, but he's terrified of suffocating on his own smoke trap, so he pushes forward to finish the job. Ditching his heavy coat, he rushes toward the underground lake, but the second he steps into the deeper cavern, the temperature violently plummets to sub-zero, and he instantly regrets dropping his jacket. He looks up to scan the ceiling, and his soul literally leaves his body. The entire roof of the cavern is densely packed with thousands of pulsing, horrifying spider eggs. A cold sweat instantly freezes on his face as he throws fireballs into the air to light up the massive room, and then, his absolute worst nightmare drops from the ceiling. He is standing face to face with the raid boss, the Winter Spider Queen. I'm actually speechless. The absolute unit of a monster lunges at him with zero hesitation, its massive claws aiming to impale him. Isaac barely dodge rolls out of the hitbox, slamming violently onto the solid ice and groaning in pure agony. He scrambles back to his feet, furiously roasting his own garbage RNG for walking directly into a boss fight. Unlike the absolute fodder he just burned, the Queen boasts high fire resistance and literally exhales frost breath. Terrified, Isaac desperately hurls fireballs at her face, but they barely even scratch her armor. He quickly realizes that if the Queen wasn't so painfully slow, he would already be a respawn screen. But his biggest issue isn't her armor. His 1-2-year-old body is completely hitting its absolute limit. Between pulling an all-nighter, hiking, and spamming magic, his physical stats are completely bottoming out. Internal thought. Asterisk. I'm alone. If I die down here, no one will even know where to look. Is this really how it ends? Asterisk. But then, an image flashes in his mind. The nanny, exhausted, trekking to a distant city every single week, just to secure high-quality wheat. She did all that back-breaking labor just so his spoiled self could eat soft bread instead of the hard local rations. Fueled by pure carb-induced gratitude, Isaac violently pulls himself together. He decides right then and there that he's going to survive this dungeon just to demand an insane amount of bread from her. Isaac drops his heavy backpack, tightly grips his rusty shovel, and blindly charges the terrifying boss like an absolute madman. Abusing her slow turn speed, he wildly swings the shovel, smashing it directly into her head and cracking her shell. But the disrespect doesn't kill her. The Queen violently thrashes, dragging Isaac completely underneath her massive body. Instead of panicking, Isaac aggressively locks onto her leg, refusing to let go. Realizing blunt force won't work, he pivots to a totally unhinged strat. He summons a fireball point blank, furiously compressing the mana over and over until the raging flame turns violently blue. Once it reaches critical mass, he violently shoves the compressed blue flame directly into the spider's exposed underbelly. The intense heat instantly starts cooking the boss's internal organs like a microwave. The Queen wildly violently shakes in agony as her HP rapidly drains to zero. Isaac desperately tries to yank his arm out of the blast zone, struggling against the thrashing monster. He finally rips his arm free, completely losing his balance and crashing back onto the ice, smacking his head hard. But it was worth it. The blue flame absolutely eviscerated the Queen, burning so hot it melted the surrounding glacier. Hours later, Isaac slowly blinks awake to the sound of familiar voices echoing above him. He recognizes Hans and the nanny talking, completely bewildered about how he ended up injured in an abandoned mine. It slowly dawns on Isaac that after nuking the Queen, his body went onto autopilot. He had completely blacked out, sleepwalked out of the dungeon, bumped into Hans at the village gate, and just collapsed into his arms. Now, fully conscious, he hears the nanny praising him, confirming that his herbal recipe completely cured Hinder. Hans starts heavily glazing Isaac, saying that despite his explosive and insensitive front, his heart is pure gold. Hearing his own hype track being played, Isaac blushes so hard he practically combusts and violently sits up to end the conversation. The two adults completely freak out, and Hans mentions he was unconscious for over half a day. The nanny furiously interrogates him, demanding to know why a 1-2-year-old was wandering around a lethal dungeon. Isaac hits them with the smoothest cap imaginable, calmly claiming he just slipped and fell while picking random herbs nearby. He knows he obviously can't drop the lore that he soloed a raid boss, because absolutely no one would believe a literal child pulled that off. He figures it's way safer to keep the mana poisoning and the spider corpses an absolute secret. If the Magic Tower scholars catch wind of it, they'll swarm his territory and ruin his peaceful grind. Hans interrupts, stressing that if the head butler finds out they left the estate, they are both going to get entirely cooked. Isaac completely agrees, and as they pack up, the nanny hands him a massive basket of apples gathered by the grateful villagers. Flexing his absolute authority, Isaac casually commands the nanny to take another entire week of paid time off. She is shocked, worrying about the head butler's wrath, but Isaac completely shuts her down. He tells her she's not going to be idle. Her sole mission for the next week is to mass-produce apple jam and pie for him. The nanny beams with a massive smile, completely accepting the baking quest. Fast forward a week, and Isaac is out in the courtyard violently grinding cardio. His insane limit testing in the dungeon completely paid off, and his mana circuits have successfully evolved from 3 to 4. His vessel has fully stabilized, allowing him to seamlessly multicast 4 spells at once. He realizes that constantly pushing his physical limits is the actual secret sauce to expanding his magic. Magic requires insane mental calculations, and when the physical body gasses out, the brain completely lags. Isaac remembers that in his past life, Lucas was always trying to force him to do stamina training, and now he finally understands why. Mid-jog, he gets aggressively summoned by Schiller, the absolute unit of a head butler, for a mandatory medical checkup. The supposed expert doctor rolls up, acting like he's the top healer in the region, but Isaac knows the guy is completely clueless about his unique stats. After running a basic diagnostic, the doctor prescribes a totally rare medicine and pulls out 6 bottles of a potion called Panacea. Isaac is actually stunned, realizing his dad is dropping insane amounts of gold just to secure top-tier loot for him. The doctor claims Panacea stabilizes mana, but Isaac knows it's actually a massive historical translation error. Panacea doesn't stabilize mana, it acts as a violent stimulant, essentially acting as a steroid for soldiers. Normally, this would be a lethal poison that would instantly detonate Isaac's unstable mana. But right now, it is the exact catalyst he needs to violently force open even more circuits. After the quack logs off, Isaac notices Schiller giving him a lethal death stare. Schiller points out how weirdly calm Isaac is acting, noting that the old Isaac used to throw massive, unhinged tantrums whenever doctors visited. Isaac smirks and asks if Schiller prefers the screaming, but the butler drops the formalities. Schiller reveals he interrogated Hans and absolutely knows Isaac cured the Black Goose kids. Schiller coldly warns Isaac that if the advisory committee finds out, the political fallout will be a massive headache. He lets Isaac off with a warning but strictly demands that Isaac ping him before doing anything reckless ever again. Even in his past life, Isaac thought Schiller was just a dry, corporate suit who hated him. But Jonas's lore dump revealed that Schiller was an absolute legend who fought and died defending the family until his last breath. Internal thought, asterisk. He plays the villain, but he's the most loyal man in this house. I see you, old man. Asterisk. Isaac hits Schiller with a knowing smile, completely validating his concern. Schiller then asks why Isaac is suddenly so obsessed with running laps. Isaac flexes his historical knowledge, stating that every 5th-class mage in history trained their physical bodies to properly channel massive mana. Later that night, Schiller is drafting his reports, concluding that Isaac's aggressive constitution means he'll never be a combat mage. He writes that Isaac should probably just respec into a scholar or alchemist to save his dad the stress. Suddenly, a maid named Rosa bursts into the office, absolutely panicking that 2 maids, Clara and Annette, have completely vanished off the map. Rosa fiercely vouches for Annette, stating she hasn't taken a single day off in 3 years, meaning she definitely didn't just quit. Cut to the servants' quarters, where Rosa is arguing with another maid and a sketchy servant named Bill. Bill is absolutely trashing the territory, complaining about the garbage weather and the constant monster spawns. The other maid asks if Bill is planning to rage quit his job, and he casually smirks, saying the chances aren't zero. The maid points out that Annette wasn't a slacker like him and was grinding to pay for her sick dad's medical bills. Bill completely crosses the line, stupidly suggesting Annette got sick of being a nurse and ran off with some random deadbeat. Rosa violently yells at him to watch his mouth, but Bill defensively claims he's just cooking up theories. Bill then drops the wildest conspiracy theory yet. He claims the disappearances are the result of dark magic sacrifices. He reminds them they work for a magic family, and suggests the Count is secretly sacrificing maids to fix Isaac's broken body. Rosa and the maid are completely horrified by the accusation and scream at Bill to stop spreading lethal rumors about the Lord who literally saved him from prison. Right as they are screaming at him, Isaac materializes directly behind Bill like a ghost. "That's a very interesting story," Isaac says, completely devoid of emotion. Isaac hits him with a chilling smile, aggressively urging him to elaborate on his sacrifice theory. Bill's soul literally ejects from his body as he realizes he was just caught trash-talking the boss's son to his face. Isaac silently drags the sweating servant to his private office for a little one-on-one interrogation. Bill stammers out the timeline. Hilda vanished 2 months ago, Clara went missing weeks later, and Annette disappeared last weekend after Mass. Isaac stares directly into Bill's soul with absolute 0 degrees of warmth and asks if he knows why. Bill is completely terrified by the lethal aura radiating off the 1-2-year-old and frantically lies that he has no idea. Isaac drops his voice, smoothly promising full immunity if Bill just spits out the truth. Bill hesitates, and Isaac directly asks if Bill genuinely believes the maids vanished because of him. Bill completely folds, stuttering out that it's super obvious Isaac is the problem. He boldly points out that Hans is Isaac's closest ally, yet Hans is constantly bruised, injured, and complaining about pain. Bill's mouth runs entirely unchecked, boldly predicting that Hans will definitely die the most agonizing death out of all of them. But Bill instantly stops talking when he realizes Isaac's entire demeanor has violently shifted into pure murderous intent. Bill drops to his knees, frantically begging for his life, crying about how he's single and hasn't even had kids yet. Isaac completely ignores the begging and casually asks one simple question: "Do you want to live?" Isaac coldly informs him that if he wants to keep breathing, he's going to run a highly specific errand. Later, sitting alone in his room, Isaac is violently haunted by the memory of Rosa and Annette from his past life. After Hans and the nanny died, those 2 maids were the only ones who voluntarily stepped up to serve the cursed Lord. Even when he aggressively tried to banish them, they absolutely refused to abandon him, constantly bringing him useless potions just to keep his hope alive. Isaac had screamed at them, demanding to know if they understood the absolute agony of accidentally killing the people you love. Annette had stepped right up to him, entirely unfazed, and softly admitted she understood completely because she accidentally caused her own friend's death. She had confessed that she could have saved Clara if she had just reached out in time. Annette had comforted a broken Isaac, gently explaining that sometimes people do terrible things they never intended, and it's just a tragic part of being human. Internal thought. Asterisk. She saved my sanity back then, and I didn't even care enough to ask for the details. I won't fail her this time. Asterisk. Moments later, Bill absolutely burst back into the room, looking obnoxiously proud of himself after finishing Isaac's intel-gathering mission. Bill confidently claims he easily cracked the case by bribing the local beggars, stating their descriptions perfectly matched the missing maids. Isaac asks for the verdict, and Bill aggressively drops a massive cap, claiming the girls were finessed by slave traders who promised them a rich life down south. Isaac plays perfectly dumb, asking why they wouldn't just travel south on their own. Bill condescendingly explains that the southern roads are a total death trap, so they needed an armed broker to escort them. Isaac completely validates him, nodding along and saying the theory makes total sense. But internally, Bill is aggressively plotting his scam. He assumes Isaac is just a clueless, sheltered kid who has 0 idea how the real world works. Bill smoothly mentions that extracting this intel was super expensive, and he totally spent all 20 silver coins Isaac gave him. Isaac acts surprised, noting that 20 silver is literally 6 months' worth of wages. Bill nervously defends his massive expense, but Isaac casually waves it off, saying he doesn't care about the cash, as long as they find the maids quickly. Bill's face completely lights up with absolute greed. He is 100% convinced he just hooked a massive whale. He fully views Isaac as a naive golden goose that he can completely milk for infinite cash. Sure, Isaac is a literal ticking time bomb of unstable mana, but Bill is totally willing to risk an explosion if the bag is heavy enough. Flashing a slimy smile, Bill boldly offers to personally lead Isaac directly to the slave broker. Everything happens in a literal microsecond. Bill aggressively blinks, and when his eyes open, he is entirely locked inside a freezing underground cell wearing absolutely nothing but his crusty underwear. He violently screams out in pure confusion, totally failing to comprehend how his reality just completely glitched. But right behind him, standing in the pitch-black shadows holding a glowing rune stone, is Isaac, wearing an absolutely demonic smile at the scammer's downfall.